Ex-prisoners of Reddit, what was the worst thing you saw inside the prison walls? I worked in the medical department of a large prison in Florida. We had an inmate bite a bigger inmate's nose off, the tip. The bigger guy kept asking the kid for sex and the kid had enough. We saw several stabbings, several were life-flighted out, but those weren't the most interesting. We had an inmate smoke some bad spice, made out of God knows what. He came to medical out of his mind and later died because it caused brain hemorrhaging. One guy got a dislocated patella and was just sitting patiently as I got his info. I asked if it hurt and he said yeah. I asked how he was so chill and he replied, because I'm not a bitch. Oh yeah, I forgot the guy that got a stick of deodorant stuck up his ass so far we had to send him out to have it surgically removed. He said he was practicing for sneaking in a cell phone but there's a 50% chance he was using it as a dildo. Inmates were very creative with their homemade dildos. Done 11 years myself. One of the worst things I've seen is two members of a gang called Goodfellas, aka 40 Deep, jumped on a blood on the way back from pill call. One used a large knife, the other had a fan motor in a net bag and used that as a flail. Also seen/heard multiple people being raped. A friend of mine admitted to me after a year or so that he had been actively raped every night by his roommate, a oak from the Bloods, for about a 5-month period. There's more just what I could think of ATM. That seems like a very animalistic and unsafe life. Yep, that's the nicest way I can voice my reaction to what you wrote. Wish we could all stop pretending prison is about rehabilitation. Here in the US. Edit, holy up votes and awards. Yes, prison is about punishment. A vast majority of you seem to forget about what happens once those prisoners are reincorporated into society. Do you think they'll be a better citizen upon release? Prisons have 4 major purposes. These purposes are retribution, incapacitation, deterrence and rehabilitation. Retribution means punishment for crimes against society. Depriving criminals of their freedom is a way of making them pay a debt to society for their crimes. People go to prison as punishment, yes. It's the prison's job to make them a productive member of society that won't resort to crime upon release. Well, that's what its job should be. There was talk about a guy assaulting his own daughter. Some guys made him a cup of morning coffee. Morning coffee is basically taking a kettle, pour cooking oil in it, heat it up and add a lot of sugar and then throw it in someone's face. It was very uncomfortable to see and hear. Edit, whoa. First comment to really blow up like this. Edit 2, 10k upvotes? Holy F, I never thought a day would come where I came home to that. Thanks for the award, strangers, although I must admit that I have mixed feelings about those helpful ones. I've noticed from these comments that when people do what you describe they add large amounts of sugar. Why is that? Is it because the concoction becomes like syrup and hard to remove? Yep. Makes the boiling oil stick and burn into the skin, almost like Molotov, benzene mixed with styrofoam, or something like that. Molotov is just a gasoline, benzene, filled bottle with a rag, created by the Finnish to spite the Russian General Foreign Minister Molotov. Styro wasn't invented yet, but you can use polystyrene and acetone to make napalm in a similarly pyrotechnic way. Are you thinking of the homemade napalm? Thanks for the correction. And I think so. I just remember some guy in there telling me that Molotov cocktails were made by adding gasoline with styrofoam and other crazy stuff. Guy seemed like a Wikipedia regarding arming a riot. You totally can add styrofoam. Gas is a very strong solvent. It will absolutely reduce polystyrene to a congealed sticky mess that is probably worse than a standard petrol bomb, mostly for the sticky mess that burns with impunity like you mentioned above. I call that an improved Molotov. Honestly, that guy was onto something stronger than run-of-the-mill lit rags and gas in a bottle. Not prison but jail. 6 months pregnant and her water broke. COs didn't believe her and waited to take her to the hospital until she was hemorrhaging. The baby died and the woman was released because they didn't want to pay medical costs. This was 2004-ish. Wow. That's effed up. They release people if it gets too expensive? It makes it so obvious how prisoners are just money/products for prisons. Yeah, we had an inmate in our county jail when I was a CO that was diagnosed with a brain tumor, so they just let her out because it would have been too expensive to take care of. So yes, definitely. So cruel and so unusual, prison systems punish people in ways indescribably disproportionate to the crime committed. What's especially sick here is that it's jail and not prison, which means she likely hasn't even been convicted of a crime yet. I spent 8 years in prison, in the state of Georgia. There was a guy who made a hustle of holding and hiding illegal cell phones for the Mexican gangs. When a shakedown search occurred, this man was responsible for the loss of many of those cell phones. He was confronted on the yard, and tried to escape by climbing the fence. He got stuck in the razor wire, shredding his forearms, while 7 or 8 Mexican gang members were stabbing him all in the back of his legs and his ass. That's the gang mentality that I find to be the most bullcrap. You tell this guy to hold on to these phones for cigs or whatever, he agrees. You then proceed to give him way more contraband than he could possibly hide. It gets found, he's probably getting time in the hole, the Mexicans get off scot-free, but they still want revenge on the guy? Mob mentality is the worst thing about any group, and that's a fact. None of us are as stupid as all of us. I'd never heard it put like that, but it's brilliant. God, I'm already scared as crap of being stabbed. This is my worst nightmare. Edit, changed from to of. I imagine this is one of those fears where exposure therapy isn't recommended. I've never been to prison, but my cousin did, and he came back out all sorts of messed up. He was arrested for drugs. According to him, he spent the majority of his time in solitary confinement. For his safety. He said that his first couple of months there were okay, as far as prison goes. But that one day, for whatever reason, some guy who had been kept separate from the general population was accidentally put with the rest of the prisoners, unsupervised, and that a few prisoners grabbed the guy and that they stomped on his elbows and legs to break them before they sodomized him with some shivs. My cousin said that those guys did it all in an instant and that they threatened him if he snitched. My cousin was later interviewed by some of the guards before they took the guys who did this, and so some thought that he had snitched. He says that he didn't, but that didn't matter because the guards had put him in solitary for safety and was eventually kept there for months longer, because he wouldn't snitch, so they tried to accuse him of being an accomplice. Also, thank you for the silver. That would F me up. Damned if you do, damned if you don't. COs put you in isolation for being a part of it, according to them, while prisoners think you're in isolation to hide from them. I spent 6 years in prison. 1 month and I watched a Crip on Crip gang stabbing. They stabbed the guy 60+ times while he was curled up in a ball screaming help. But nobody could, because you'd be a target next. He somehow survived, but I couldn't tell you how. I think about it every day. Random question. In movies/TV, they often depict people in a situation where they are forced to take sides, join a gang, or forced to participate in other crimes. How accurate is this? Suppose I went to prison, but I wanted to mind my own business. Like, stay in my cell, read books, talk to my cellmate, eat my food, etc. Stay out of gang stuff, don't pick sides, etc. How easy is it to just mind your own business? That's what I did. I also found the other unaffiliated guys, and it seemed like we all tended to have a similar mindset. It's also important to note you have guys in prison who are criminals and you have people who made mistakes. I'm a guy who made a big mistake. I was asked to join gangs but just said no. Relatively quickly, through good behavior, I was able to go to what they call an annex in Tennessee. It's minimum security. At that point, even gang affiliations mostly don't matter. It was just guys like myself trying to get home. Yep, just trying to get the F out of there. No reason to cause trouble when you're out in a couple months or whatever. It's the people who are in there for so long it doesn't matter to them anymore about what drove me. Getting the F out of there as fast as possible. This is pretty much exactly how my time in prison was. I got offered white power literature more times than I can even remember. Funny enough, it was those same white guys that ended up ripping me off. The GDs always took care of me and made sure I had what I needed. It's actually not that hard. What becomes difficult is when the slightest encounter turns into a confrontation that does make you choose. But if you are simply there and will watch anything on TV or be okay with whatever is happening around you, it is pretty simple to keep to yourself. Yeah, like I would want to just get my tray, sit down in an empty seat, and eat my food. But if someone takes it as an egregious insult because I sat in their spot? I mean, how do you handle that crap? The sane option, hey man, that's my spot. Ah, okay, sorry. I didn't know, then get up. The crafty option? Wanting to fight sometime because they unknowingly sat in your spot. How do you even respond to that sort of crap? I imagine the easy way to do it is to assume you're at the bottom. Sit down last or not at all, don't touch the remote, don't speak unless spoken to, assume respect towards everyone, avoid eye contact where possible, etc. until you understand daily life, do nothing more than keep your chin up, sit up straight, and wait. Edit. Emphasis to clarify, this is not a long-term strategy. Of course you'll eventually have to defend yourself, but if your goal is to fly under the radar, you better be sure you understand the consequences of throwing fists before you anger the wrong person. Wait, watch, respect, and don't assume. Oh, so just like high school. The problem is that other inmates will take your stuff. The cells are open throughout the day. There's nothing to stop inmates from entering your cell, taking your snacks, your headphones, crap, even the food off your tray. And if you don't belong to a race, you'll have no way to stop that crap when it happens. I knew a guy that went in, and his first day he went back to his bunk and someone had stolen his toilet paper, toothbrush, etc. He quit showering and wiping his ass. The belongings mysteriously showed back up very quickly. That's because in most prisons there are very limited public resources available to the prisoners. In some places there are so much as less than a dozen toilets for the entire pod, where there's like upwards of 50 people in said pod. Prisoners take respecting the crafters and cleanliness extremely seriously. They probably stole his crap to F with him and determine where he's at on the social ladder. Once they figured out he isn't a bitch and will actually just willingly smell like crap instead of bitching or snitching, they probably returned his stuff. If it wasn't his bunkmate who took his crap, his bunkmate probably pleaded with whoever took it to give it back. They really don't like people who smell like crap. Like almost to the point where they are willing to let bygones be bygones over it. My old hockey coach had to spend 6 months in prison. While there he had to beat the crap out of these two 20-year-old kids because they kept stealing his stuff. Dude was like 45 at the time. Give me your cocktail, fruit. A guy I work with did 20 years, and he said you're not forced to join sides, but if you're friendly with a group of guys you're expected to help out if something goes down. If not, you're cut out and will likely get your ass beat. He said a lot of times guys will fight, and that's that. Some hold grudges and will keep trying to fight you. A lot of people will keep to themselves, and do their time. A few times he got into a fight, and him and the other guy didn't have beef again. Fair fight. He had a few jobs and worked a lot, too, so he didn't get into many altercations, as a lot of guys had jobs as well and no one wants to screw that up. It puts money on your books and you get to be out and about. Prison is a lot better than county jail, calmer than you'd think, from his experiences. It really depends on where you go. Most places it's hard to mind your own business unless you are big and or in great shape. At a minimum, in most prisons you'll get heart checked very soon upon arrival. Which means someone will at least try to beat your ass. If you handle it well, you pass the test, and you can generally mind your own business as long as you don't act like a prick afterwards. That's terrible. I've got a lot of bad stories, but that was certainly the worst. What's the second worst you've seen? Not another stabbing, but I was at a CCA, now Core Civic, prison which is notorious for their poor health care. There was a guy in my pod who for weeks was complaining of testicular pain. He'd go to sick call and they would refer him to the doctor. That usually took 6 weeks and his ball hurt. One night he took a plastic chair, went to the shower, turned on the water, took the blade out of a shaving razor, cut his nutsack open and removed his testicle. I didn't see the next part, but a very close friend of mine was at sick call when there was a knock at the door. My friend said, I just thought someone was being impatient, then there was a second more urgent knock followed by the door opening. The guy was standing there, put his severed testicle, which was now in a medicine cup, on the nurse's cart and said, sorry to interrupt your sick call, I fixed my problem but I can't seem to stop the bleeding. I didn't see his ball, but there was more blood in the pod than I thought a person could lose. This whole thing was actually on the news here in Nashville. It's 8:30 a.m. and I'm done with Reddit today. I'm going to go read a book. Yep, I'm out too. Sounds like he might have had testicular torsion. It can often be preceded by warning pains in the weeks, months prior, as the testis torts but manages to unwind itself instead of going into full torsion. Don't have any myself, but have seen 2 men come into the ed with torsion screaming their heads off and need huge amounts of morphine to even be able to examine them. If we'd handed them a scalpel, I don't think they would have hesitated to cut their own ball off. I once had a bad pain in my testicles, so went to the hospital. Because torsion can cause irreparable damage if not resolved very quickly, I got rushed straight through to see a doctor within 10 minutes, jumped the queue ahead of loads of people already waiting. One doctor messed about with my balls for a bit, then got a senior doctor in. The senior doctor came in and he had like 5 student doctors with him, all standing there with clipboards. He was like, "Okay, drop your trousers." I politely asked whether we could reduce the number of people in the room who would be staring at my dick and balls while holding clipboards, presumably ready to write about/draw the whole thing at a moment's notice. Anyway, the pain went away after they had messed with it a bit, so possibly they untwisted it. I had to go for an ultrasound a week later, which was weird too. Sitting in a dark room alone with some guy while he rubbed goo all over my balls in silence, neither of us particularly enjoying the process. He didn't wipe me off or give me any wipes either, so I had to leave with goo all over my balls and awkwardly penguin walk to the toilet. Good times. I had the Dr. Posse experience once. But it was due to a fluid buildup in the sac around my heart that was crushing it to the point where one half was already collapsed. They said if I'd been an hour later I wouldn't have made it to the hospital at all. Yo, that's nuts. Taking the phrase "losing your marbles" literally. Guy has more balls than me for doing that. Emo, this is sicker than the stabbing one. How can I unread this? If you read it backwards, it's a guy that puts his testicle back to where it was and recovers from the pain. And a stabbing beat that? I've never been to prison, but I found a fresh suicide where a duck was eating the dude's brain through a fist-size hole in his skull. And self-testicular amputation beats that hands down. Jesus. What series of unfortunate events led you to that? Helping a friend move closer to school, her roommate was suffering the side effects of heavy metal poisoning and was wheelchair-bound. Just chance he chose that day to snoop and find her .45. For someone who doesn't work in a field that has contact with corpses, I seem to find or come in close proximity to a disproportionate amount of dead bodies for some reason. Few years before that, my dad's neighbors decided to use a shotgun to paint the inside of his garage with his brains, while I was visiting for the summer. A guy who got stabbed 59 times. Pre-code new high score. Enter your name /code/pre. Seeing someone on the threes jump to his death. Just missing people on the deck. Saw a guy try to kill himself. The block only had 2 tiers. He walked up the stairs and the phones were right at the top. He grabbed the hook and used it to climb on top of the phone with the side railing. He then leaned over the rail holding the hook and fell back. He just broke his back and did the rest of his bid/life in a wheelchair. Life with an extra dose of FU. That's wild. Thank you for watching. If you like our videos, please like them on YouTube. And share them with your friends. Please subscribe to be the first to know about Red Rabbit Reader's new videos. We welcome your comments below. Another of our videos will begin shortly.